teenage bedroom part of the exhibit, and it really explains why I took all the pictures. That every day I was out on assignment, I was doing different jobs, all of these different stories in different magazines. I only picked pictures that were all mine, and I took all these pictures. But it explains that you don't set out to take an iconic moment, you set out to get a job done and to tell a story. And that's what all these are. They're all stories about different bands and different places and different events. And then one day at a time, it adds up into a lot. After 40 years, you have a real lot. I was living with a band in the late 60s, and I was always into music, and I always liked exciting things. And I liked taking pictures of it. There were a band called the Glitter House. They got signed to Atlantic Records, and they used my pictures for the promo kit. And the record company hired me to do more pictures, and I met more people. And every time I met somebody, every time I did a job, I'd meet more and more people, and it just kind of snowballed, and one thing led to another. I was working 24/7. I was often behind on my rent. It was very hard to make a living. The magazines didn't pay much, $35, $50 for a picture, so you had to sell a lot of pictures to a lot of magazines. It's one of the reasons I was working so hard all the time, because I always had to have more pictures to sell to magazines. My first really big break was when I met Ike and Tina Turner. I had taken some pictures at a nightclub, and I brought the pictures with me a few days later with some friends. We were going to see them play again. And while I was showing the pictures to my friends, Ike Turner walked by, and one of my friends pushed me in front of Ike and said, "Show Ike the pictures," and I did, and he liked them. And he took me in the dressing room to show them to Tina, and she liked them, and I started traveling with Ike and Tina, and taking a lot of pictures of them. I made a lot of videos for them. And Ike would just kind of peel off a few $100 bills. There was no invoice involved or anything. And he introduced me to more people in the record company, and I met more and more people, from John Lennon to John Lydon, from Muddy Waters to the Rolling Stones, to Elvis to Madonna, Bob Dylan to Bob Marley, Blondie, Patti Smith, The Clash. It's just, I don't know, one thing led to another all my life. I wasn't really part of the Warhol scene. They seemed like they were high on drugs, and I wasn't, and I really was kind of a little scared of that scene. I ended up eventually knowing them later in the 70s, but in the late 60s, I really wasn't part of that. Well, I saw Iggy when he played in New York, but again, I didn't really get too involved with him until later in the 70s. I was working with John and Yoko. Actually, I got involved in a book, and the writer was doing a story about John and Yoko, and he had me take some pictures when he was doing an interview, and I met the Elvis Memory Band. And they had the same manager as the New York Dolls. And they asked me to take pictures of the Dolls, and I met them, and I got to be kind of family with the Dolls. They were a lot of fun to be with, and just a great bunch of guys, so I took a lot of pictures for them. And then towards the end of the New York Dolls, Malcolm McLaren came over to sell them some clothes and was working with them for a little while. So a year and a half later, when I went to England, Malcolm was the only person I knew really over there. And he took me to a club, the Club Louise, where I met the Sex Pistols and the Clash and Billy Idol. I think Susie and the Banshees were there, a whole bunch of people there. And kind of the formation of the punk rock scene, Caroline Coon and John Savage, who wrote about it. And I think Caroline and Vivienne Westwood took me to see the Clash for the first time at the ICA in London. And I liked them a lot. So when I came back to London a year later, I wanted to go see the Clash. And on that trip, I went to Glasgow and then Edinburgh. And I got to meet them and take some pictures with them. And when they came to New York, I was one of the few people they knew. So the Clash, I used to drive them around. I had a big old '54 Buick, real rock and roll car. So we used to cruise around town. During the day, I would often do a photo session, a publicity session of a band, or record company pictures or something, and then a press party, and then maybe I'd go see Led Zeppelin in the Madison Square Garden, take pictures there, and then after party pictures, and then finally 1 in the morning or so, 2 in the morning, I'd get to go down to CBGB's, and they were still rocking down there till, I mean, they would have 2 shows a night, from starting at 7 and 11, and 3 or 4 bands in each show. So they were going till 3:30, 4 in the morning every night. And I just kept going every day, 4, 5, 6 places. Every band has its own different audience, and I'm always fascinated actually with the fans, because I like the whole spectacle, not just the band, but who's there, how the show goes down, how people react to it. The New York Dolls were way ahead of their time, and it depends on how you measure success. It wasn't commercial success, but the fact that 35 years later they're still inspiring people, and that's why I just put this new book out, New York Dolls. And David Johansen and Sylvain did interviews in the book and kind of tell the story. But I think this book is going to open them up to a whole new audience, a whole new generation, because they are very inspiring. And the dolls made it look very easy. You know, a lot of bands, they had to be proper musicians, and you had to play right, and you had to learn how to do that. And then when you saw the dolls, they obviously didn't learn how to do it, but they were having fun doing it. And they just played, and they just played loud and raucous, and it was fun. It's in retrospect that people kind of separate, you know, folk from folk rock, from glam rock to punk rock. It's all rock and roll to me. I mean, I started out listening to Chuck Berry, and I still like a 3-minute rock and roll song. And, you know, the punks got a bad name with the Sex Pistols and the English press, mostly. The English press tried to say that, you know, the filth and the fury, and tried to play it up as a violent kind of attitude. But actually, I think the punks were actually, what they say is that the punks were hippies with short hair. You know, because if you listen to the Clash songs, it's all very positive. And a lot of the punk songs are very positive. And they're very loud and maybe angry, but it was angry about the hypocrisy and the lack of opportunity. And it was really a positive idea of trying to find more opportunity, more freedom, the freedom for people to be what they want to be. And, you know, I don't think that's violent. You know, I don't think that's filth or fury. I think that's very positive. And so for me, it's been, you know, I started out seeing a concert of Pete Seeger, and he was singing about peace and love and understanding, and he got the whole audience to sing along, and everybody was singing and having fun together and getting the meaning. And I've always followed that kind of idea, you know, with Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan, and you know, later Buffalo Springfield, New York Dolls, we're a very socially conscious group, and then of course the Clash. You know, they say the Sex Pistols made people want to scream and yell, but the Clash gave them the reasons. And they were kind of the thinking man's punk group. Well, the Clash never forgot what it was like to be a fan. And when the Ramones came to London, the Clash were, you know, on the dole. They were poor kids, they didn't have money, and the Ramones snuck them in through the dressing room window. And the Clash never forgot that, and they always tried to repeat that, and they knew what it was like to be a fan and to be outside and not have money enough to get in. And they were always sneaking people in. And one of the things that was really great about the Clash is they were always open to talk to their fans. And, you know, many bands try to keep the fans away, and they have guards and say you're not allowed backstage. But the Clash guards actually help people get backstage. Anybody who wanted to talk to the band could come back and talk to them. And sometimes they have to wait a little while. The Clash, you know, would come off stage and they have to dry off or, you know, relax or fight over who played the wrong note during the show, or maybe talk to the record company for a while. So sometimes the fans had to wait 20 minutes or sometimes an hour. But whoever waited around got to come in the dressing room, talk to the band. They never walked away from their fans. And they didn't just talk to them, they listened to them. And that was a big difference. And always the one thing that made Joe Strummer really special from other, you know, rock star people is that he listened to people and he had conversations with them and didn't just talk to them, but talked with them. And they liked to learn from the fans. They wanted to know what the fans thought, because that's who was paying them. That's who their boss was. That's where the money was coming from. So they always related to the fans. And like I say, they never forgot what it was like to be a fan. And they were a great group, great bunch of guys. It's hard for me to explain what makes a band timeless. That's really for people to decide, and it comes out over time. You don't walk in and see a band first time and go, well, this is it, I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. I mean, all of these pictures, this whole room full of pictures and the whole exhibit, they were all made one picture at a time, one day at a time. And you don't know on that day that, you know, what you're seeing is history. You know, you find it out 10, 20, 30 years later.